How do we deal with grief? Every single one of us at some point in our life will experience the pain of loss and have to go through some kind of grieving process. But what's the best way to do that? In this video, I talked to one of my industry's leading experts on working with and helping others through grief. That's right, this week I'm talking to the awesome Dipti Tait. Welcome back to my channel. I'm Tim Box, remedial hypnotist and mind coach. I work one-to-one with people to help them overcome all sorts of emotional and psychological issues, and in particular, to help them get the other side of high anxiety and panic. However, today's video represents a promise I made to you guys in a recent live stream where I said I was going to put some content up to help those who are right now going through grief. Now, whilst I've seen many clients over the years to help them deal with different types of loss, I wouldn't by any means call myself an expert in this area. Fortunately, I know someone who is. You see, a few weeks ago while speaking at the UK Hypnosis Convention, I was fortunate enough to run into Dipti Tait. Now, you might know Dipti from her appearances on UKTV, but if you don't, Dipti is a hypnotherapist who's pretty much an expert on dealing with grief. In fact, she's written a couple of books on it. I'll link to those in the description. I'll also link to Dipti's YouTube channel, so after you've watched this, head over there and check out her videos. I sat down for a chat with Dipti the other day and we recorded a couple of videos for you. In this first one, I find out a little bit about Dipti's background and what led her to work in and specialise in this area. And she then takes me through one of the elements from her book, Good Grief, that she calls the No Yes Principle, which is designed to help you facilitate and start to create the emotional and psychological shifts you need to get you through and out the other side of the grief process. So let's get into it. Okay. So Dipti, welcome to my channel. Thanks so much for coming on and doing these videos with me today. It's lovely to see you here.
Thank you for asking me, Tim.
You're very welcome. I thought I had to get you on my channel because when we met at the Hypnosis Convention and we were talking about some things, I thought, right, you're coming on my channel. We're going to talk about some things. In particular, we're going to talk about grief as an issue and people dealing with grief. Now, I've got you talking about this because of your book, Good Grief, which is absolutely awesome. And I would recommend anyone going through any sort of loss or change or, grief in particular to pick up a copy of. What caused you to write the book exactly?
Yeah, it's a good question, really. I didn't think when I was 7 years old, oh, I know what I want to do when I grow up. I want to be a grief author. Unfortunately, grief came to find me. And it came to find me when I was not expecting it. Like most of us, none of us sit there prepared for grief. It does tend to come, out of the blue. And so unfortunately for me, I'm an only child and my dad was diagnosed with leukemia. And I found out when I was he was 60 and I was 22, 23. Yeah. And then between the diagnosis and his death was basically not very long at all, right. 2 or 3 months. So it was pretty, out of the blue, and then a total wipeout, from my point of view. Yeah. So that happened when I was in my early 20s. And at the time, my mum, she was so reliant on my dad, like everything. She was one of these people that couldn't really do very much on her own. She couldn't drive. She couldn't do banking, just so much. She was reliant on him. So eventually what happened was I kind of turned into the parent and she turned into the child. So in my early 20s, again, I wasn't ready for that type of switch over either. Yeah. And then unfortunately, she got diagnosed with terminal cancer and then I nursed her as well. And then she died. So I didn't have any other people to share that loss with because I'm an only child. So even though obviously other people in my family would have lost their auntie or their uncle or whatever, but it's not the same as losing your mum and dad and having, that type of thing happen to you so early on in life. So that's really where the book came from. It wasn't meant to be a book. It was more of a, I don't know, like just collection of thoughts, stream of consciousness for me, really, to cope with what was going on and not going on in my own life and head and behavior. And then eventually I met up with a book writing coach just by pure coincidence and told her that I'd written these grief diaries. And she said, oh, can I look at them? And I was like, no way. That's like, everything. It's like, you might as well just ask me to stand there with no clothes on. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And anyway, she convinced me that actually this is a book here and this will be really helpful for other people.
Well, this is it. And I think it's of such great value just reading through it myself and seeing some of the thoughts that you put out there and some of the techniques as well, and the sort of exercises to go through. And the thing that struck me is, this really what you came to yourself in terms of how you started to deal with this, or is it because you went through some grief counselling or got some help separately? Is it are you passing on techniques, or are they of your own inception?
Basically, there's a combination, really. So I did start with grief counselling because it was offered to me by my work, and I didn't really get on with that, to be honest. So I kind of stopped going. But then what happened was someone mentioned hypnotherapy to me, and I'd not really. I'd heard of hypnotherapy, but I hadn't really considered having any sessions. And funnily enough, I started to Google about hypnotherapy, and I couldn't really find a hypnotherapist that I thought I would connect with. But what I did find was a training school, and I was at a loose end at the time. So I just thought, oh, you know what? I'm just gonna change my life and train. And in the end, I ended up training while grieving. And the training was like my therapy. So I was kind of getting the skills at the same time as helping myself. So then the book, I was writing the book while training at the same time. So that's where the two kind of come together, really.
It's extraordinary, isn't it? We talk a lot about people who come to therapy because they've got the other side of their own struggles, but there's also loads of us that go through it because we're going through them at the time, and we use it as kind of a platform to address those issues for ourselves. I think that's it's a real truth. I've seen so many people over the years that come through the training process simply because they'd rather learn how to do stuff for themselves than go somewhere else to get the help,
Yeah, and that's it, isn't it? That's total empowerment, isn't it? It's if you can figure out how to sort yourself out, then you're totally self-sufficient in that way.
Exactly. Well, anyway, so let's get on to the actual point of the video then, because there's loads of stuff in the book that are real practical tips and advice. But there was one thing in particular that for various reasons you and I got talking about at the conference that we met at, this thing you call the no yes principle. Right. So why do you think this is, as in terms of here's a takeaway from a brief YouTube video, why is this one an important one, do you think?
I think because it's a really simple principle to help you when your brain is in the kind of most biggest state of confusion, really. So I suppose when your brain is in that state of uncertainty or self-doubt or whatever, it's really important to have something that you could just simply go to rely on to just get yourself out of that pickle, really. So do you want me to explain?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and this is the thing, if I can, the thing that struck me was when it comes to dealing with grief, the thing that I'm always talking to my practitioners about when we're training is it's more important than anything, any other issue that we work on, to know what our target is in terms of what we're working on and what we want the change to be. So this resonated so much with me as a tool for us to, like you say, clear the confusion and get clarity on what we're here to do. So yeah, please take us through it.
So it's really about your answer. So the no yes principle relies on your answer to two questions being no, then yes. So the first question is my current feeling useful? So that would be something someone can easily, identify. Is this useful or not? That's quite an easy thing to kind of work out.
Right.
If they say no, then you go, okay, brilliant. There's one tick. We got the no. And then the next question is, do I want to change how I'm feeling? Right. So with, I don't know if you've heard the hypnotherapy joke. How many hypnotherapists does it take to change a light bulb?
Go on.
Have you heard that one?
I think I might have. There's loads of different answers to this one. I've heard loads of different answers. But,
So the answer I've got here is it only takes one, only if the light bulb wants to change.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah.
So basically, obviously, with anybody, they have to want to change to make any change happen.
Right.
So the yes part of the no yes principle is, do I want to change how I'm feeling? So they have to be saying yes to then continue with, the kind of advancement of the principle. So that's where the no yes part comes in.
Yeah.
So then the third question is more of a let's dig down into where you want to go here.
Yeah.
So what feeling do I want to move towards? Now, obviously, when people are grieving, that can feel a little bit overwhelming. They will say things like, well, I don't want to feel anxious, or I don't want to feel low, or I don't want to feel X, Y, or Z. And I have to say to them, well, you've just told me what you don't want to feel, kind of a bit like a Google search. We've got to think about what you do want to feel.
Yeah.
And that takes a little bit of, thinking about, because they're not used to thinking about what they do want to feel. They're usually wanting to avoid the thing, that they don't want to feel.
I think this is so important with grief as well, because it's simply that's one of those things, isn't it, where all our focus is on, I just don't want to feel the way I do right now. But we don't necessarily have great clarity on what's the goal then? What's it going to look like? How am I going to feel when I'm on the other side of this sort of thing? What am I aiming for here? And I think you're right. If we're asking our mind to make a change for us, unless we have clarity on what we want that change to be, all too often we're just sort of we're reaching around in the dark. It's like a friend of mine, he has this principle of of getting in a taxi, and it's like the first thing you need to tell the taxi driver is exactly where you want to go, and if you just say not here, the taxi doesn't move because he needs a destination before he starts.
Brilliant. And that's exactly what I say about the sat nav. The sat nav needs to be programmed, otherwise you're just driving. And the sat nav's just showing you where you are at the moment.
Exactly.
So that's exactly the same principle there, is that we do need a destination, and our brain also needs a focus. So that's actually interesting, because then we can talk about what I bring into my therapy is the miracle question, because quite often people don't believe they can feel better, or they don't know how, or they don't know what it is, because they're so confused. So that can help when you ask somebody if a miracle or a magic wand was waved about, and you're left here today feeling X, what would X be? Don't worry about it, whether you believe it can happen or not, but what would X be? So that's just another nice way, isn't it, of breaking through the disbelief or the uncertainty.
We see this a lot when people come in and say, oh, what do we want? I want to be able to, I don't know, manage my panic attacks better or something. And then you introduce the concept of, wouldn't you rather just not have panic attacks? And then they're kind of like, well, that'd be amazing. But obviously, so it's like it hasn't even been entertained as a possibility. So we haven't even set our mind the task of trying to get us there. So I think that's a great one as well. Yeah.
And so then it's about, once they've identified, say it is, just actually, it's always quite a simple answer, isn't it? People really all ask for either peace of mind or happiness or clarity, or, strength, or whatever it is, to be able to deal with life, whatever's going on or not going on. So then once they've got some kind of anchor word in their head, I then ask them, okay, so there's the where you want to be picture. Here you are right here today. What small thing would move you towards that? So it's almost like you then break the goal down into incremental bits. So it's bite-sized chunks. So that's where their brain can kind of go, okay, well, I can manage this little step. I don't know if I'm going to get all the way over there, but if I just can just manage this little step. And then obviously, as we continue to take little steps forward in the right direction, like Like the taxi driver will get you
Yeah.
to your destination eventually, and so will the sat nav.
So are we talking about actual little actions that people can perform, or little ways they can feel differently or react differently, or things like that? What are we talking about specifically, and what sort of examples do we have here?
I definitely ask my clients for small actions.
Yeah, actually, yeah.
Yeah, because I believe that small actions, it's a bit like I can theorize about how I would walk over there, and
Yeah.
I can ruminate about how I would walk over there. But if I'm not actually taking the steps, I won't be over there
I get
anytime
you.
soon. So
Yeah.
it is all about small actions and breaking them down into tiny bits, manageable chunks. And it could be that someone just says, you know what, I'll get up an hour earlier tomorrow,
Yeah. Yeah.
or, I will make an appointment with X or Y or Z, or whatever it is. And, as soon as they're starting to make a little bit of progress, they're much more likely to continue with that progress.
I think you're spot on. When we look at the whole journey, in its entirety, it can be demotivating, can't it? It can discourage us from taking the first step. But if all we're trying to do is just be a step further on each time, it suddenly becomes a little bit more possible and and ponderable as well, isn't it?
And the last question is, how will I know I'm there? And that's where we then bring into the scenario, the feelings, and the possibility, and who else would notice, what would you be doing, how can you see yourself now, just kind of using the imagination in that way to create that reality, really.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I think identifying the target in terms of recognizing it is so vital for the work we do as well, isn't it? Because all too often we adapt to our new normal so quickly that we barely notice that we've moved so far from where we were as well. But I think this is the thing, and I know, so people watching this video, if you're outside of this situation, if you're not experiencing difficulties at the time, these seem like almost overly simple questions and overly simple principles. But I'm guessing, because knowing from my experience of working with people, there's a lot of potential like objections coming forward from the subconscious during this process, So is this a process you'd expect to find a client, or even if we're doing this ourselves watching this video, is it something we'd find it easy to do, or is it okay if we hit certain problems or objections? I mean, even that first question, is my current feeling useful? It's not uncommon, particularly with grief, for the answer to be, it benefits me right now to feel this way. I mean, sometimes people often feel like they're betraying a memory of somebody if they feel any better about the fact that they've gone, so it's almost like they lock themselves in that process, don't they?
It's really true. And that's a really good example of, for example, if we take guilt, someone will say, well, if I don't feel guilty, it might mean I didn't love that person. And that's exactly what I hear. And then in that case, I will say something like, imagine that person was listening to that now, what would they say? And often the other person wouldn't want that person to sit there feeling guilty. It's just not going to be the case. So it's about recognizing that something like guilt, for example, is a kind of illusionary feeling. I don't like guilt as an emotion. I feel there's a lot of positives in a lot of emotions, emotions, apart from guilt. I can't find a positive for that one. Like you talk about positives of anxiety all the time, and I totally agree. Positives of fear, positives of anger. Can't see a positive for guilt at all.
I get what it's almost like it's holding us to task for some, like an external point of information or something in terms of that. I get totally what you're saying. Well, this is kind of leads us on then to, because we're going to do a second video that's going to go up on the channel next week, where we're going to break down some things that people didn't know about grief, things, maybe assumptions that we'd made, that challenging those assumptions actually helps us move on. But is there any sort of kind of final thought with regard to this little process? Because obviously people might be watching this video, they might be like, right, okay, I'm going to go through this process. Is there anything that they need to keep in mind while they go through this process of asking themselves these questions?
That's a good question. And it's important to know that we can't fast track or delete grief. It is something we do have to go through.
Yeah.
And the no yes principle isn't massively appropriate to get over grief when you're not ready to get over grief.
Yeah, it's not like it's a
sense.
shortcut to doing what you need to do. Yeah, I get you.
Yeah,
totally.
so, if your partner died last week, you can't be doing the no yes principle this week and expect it to work. So grief has a shelf life, and that's a personal shelf life for everybody. And really, when people come to this principle, it's because at some level they feel ready to start moving on. They might not know how they want to move on, or of what the timeline of that is, but they do feel that they're ready to get that help.
Yeah, it's like question 3, 4, and 5 aren't going to do you any good unless you've got the right answers to question 1 and 2. And that's what tells you if you're ready, kind of thing, doesn't it? Yeah.
And people ask for therapy when they're ready as well, don't they? I mean,
Absolutely.
that's and people read the book when they're ready. And I always say to people, I'm not going to send you my book immediately. Or I might do, but you might not pick it up immediately. You might pick it up 6 months down the line, but you'll pick it up when it's right for you.
Brilliant. Honestly, Dipti, thank you so much for breaking all that down for us. I think that's a super valuable process to go through when you're going through any type of loss. And so thank you for joining me today to do this. And we're going to carry on talking now for another video that's going to go up next week on the channel, which is all about those things that we maybe didn't realize we didn't know about grief. But for now, Dipti, thank you so much.
Thank you, Tim.
So there you have it, some great tips and advice from a true expert in the field. If you want to take a deeper dive into this topic, then pick up a copy of Dipti's book, Good Grief, where she explores and expands on these ideas further. I'll put the link to this in the video description. In the next video, coming your way in a few days, Dipti will be taking us through 6 things that you probably didn't realize about grief, but really need to. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and ring the notification bell so you're told when this one goes up. Also, if you're new to the channel and you have a specific anxiety-related question you want answered, then you can ask me directly every Friday evening at 6 p.m. London time when I do a live anxiety Q&A. And if you found my videos helpful, then you can also now become a member of this channel and get access to hours of extra content and exclusive members-only live sessions. Just click the join button on the main page. But that's it for now. I'm Tim Box. Always remember to be kind to your mind, and I'll see you next time.